session now, the journey to resilient and frictionless. It is the topic of the moment, the year, and the incoming decade. And what a world that we've launched into with COVID-19. And really, this is the topic of the moment. You know, 87% of CSCOs say it's difficult already to predict and proactively manage disruption. So how do we think about these dynamics as we engage? Well, today's supply chain, no doubt, are complex, and organizations really are now operating in a more volatile environment than ever before. So as customers' needs change and trading partner ecosystem grows, it's really paramount that supply chain professionals focus on reducing business friction in supply chains. It's how the new world is really demanding how you work. So it's my thrill and pleasure to introduce to you our next panelists here. Levine Naidu. Hi, Levine. It's good to see you. He's an IBM executive, Sterling Supply Chain. As frictionless supply chain executive within the IBM Sterling business unit, he has led a number of initiatives of economic significance across a number of geographies. So we're going to depend on you to give us a little bit of that expertise, Levine. Also want to say hi to Pradeep Singh. He's a supply chain consulting squad lead and leads IBM supply chain consulting squad across the Asia Pacific region. He's a management consultant with more than 15 years of experience as a senior supply chain and operations advisor across APAC, having directly worked with top management consulting in multinational companies. Hi, Pradeep. Also want to say hi to Vipin Jain. He's a general manager at Maruti Suzuki India Limited, IT division. Over 30 years of experience there, noted at Maruti Suzuki. IT professional with a number of decades of experience in various roles and domains in the automobile industry, of course, master in supply chain, right there, that industry. And you've handled as well various IT functions like system analysts, system development and implementation. So we're going to tap your brains there as well, Vipin. And last but not least, hello, Grant. Grant, it is good to see you. This is Grant Edhouse. He's an experienced chief financial officer and COO, and in fact, he holds both those titles currently at Tektronic Industries, TTI Australasia. Joining us from Melbourne with your area of expertise with demonstrated history of working in the consumer goods industry. You're skilled in operational strategy, service delivery, supply chain management, and I could go on and on, but I think maybe right now the audience is just itching to get at you guys right now with some questions. But look, all of us are really joining at this one moment, and a lot of our audience is really keen to understand how supply chain management thinking really has changed, or maybe not changed, and evolved. So Grant, this question to you: did the pandemic really highlight the importance of supply chain for you in your industry's business operations? I mean, what do you think the challenges were that rose in your specific situation?
Yeah, look, we certainly had some challenges in supply chain. Most of our products for the ANZ region come out of China. Obviously, with the initial outbreak of COVID in Wuhan, we saw the effects of the shutdown in our factory. Getting that back to full capacity was key to continue to supply product into our markets. We were lucky in that our factory did get up to full capacity back by April, which was ahead of a lot of our competitors. So having that flexibility or ability to get back to normal operating conditions under COVID was key to the success we've seen this year. And then what we found was, with some of the impacts in demand changes where, with lockdown scenarios where people are at home, some of our products, to give you an idea, are mainly in the power tools range. So we saw a spike in DIY, do-it-yourself demand, and that was unprecedented. We had, sellout rates of 50, 60, up to 80, 90% compared to the same time last year. We'd never seen that before. So we actually went from planning to reduce our numbers for the year to actually having to expand our capacity. And so we almost had to throw the old playbook out and a lot of our demand history out the window and pivot to looking at demand changes in a very short time frame, and that was a big change for us.
Pivot is the name of the game right now. I can only imagine that when Wuhan happened, you really were at ground zero of the epidemic before it became a pandemic, a global pandemic. And so you saw it from day one, and then you were almost a beneficiary in the aftermath as people just wanted to do more, at home when they had to be shelter in place. How did you pivot without really, falling, and or, how did you overcome those obstacles that are obvious, in supply chain? How were you able to maintain that flexibility? Because sometimes it's the minutia of supply chain that really gets you.
One of our strategies is really looking at or building our supply chain in the ANZ region around demand-driven supply chain. So we run a VMI program across a large section of our business, and that allowed us to see those demand changes at the shelf on a daily basis at the shelf level. So we saw those pickups happen quite quickly. So that gave us a chance to revise our forecast, and we started using the daily sales information from our customers to create new forecasts. So we'd run a normal, monthly S&OP, S&OE process, and that really changed to a weekly cycle. When we saw the demand patterns change and lift, we then had to make some educated guesses around what we were seeing in terms of those demand shifts and whether they were permanent or not. So we had, some of it is never going to have the full picture, but you got to make some educated guesses. So certainly, as the closer that you can get your supply chain to the customer shelf, gives you that ability to react quickly. And I think also, from a commercial viewpoint, we decided we were going to keep our sales staff in store as long as possible. Where they weren't in store, they were still on the phones in contact with customers. So as soon as we understood that from our customers that the demand shifted, changed, and increased, we were able to react. And if I look at some of our competitors, they stood down their sales force. They weren't in store. So it's not just the supply chain, but it's the entire approach that the business takes. And we saw this really as an opportunity. We've got substitutable products where our competitors have, but we decided to increase the inventory and really, attack the market. And we saw those opportunities. We've been able to exploit them. So not only did we pick up increased business from the demand shift we saw with the COVID measures, but also there was out of stocks that our competitors, they didn't react the same way. So we picked up even more of their demand, and that gave us increased market share and increased our customer base. So it's been tough for us because we've had the other problem where we've been trying to stay on top of the demand curve, and air freight is probably 4 or 5 times larger than what it would normally be. But even with that, we've been able to go back to customers and get them to share the cost, because they understand that our competitors can't supply, but they get a benefit of obviously not missing out on the sales we do. So having those collaborations with your customers up front is also key, and having open and transparent discussions around sharing the costs and sharing the opportunities that have arisen.
And it's really a great example of the fact that resilience is one thing. It actually does take courage to be resilient. It takes that kind of added level and layer of vision and commitment to the customer that brings it to the forefront. I noted that, obviously your demand spiked. You were able, in your supply chain to address it. But what about the vulnerabilities, from actually, being able to manufacture the very things that your customers wanted? How did you overcome those vulnerabilities?
I think we're lucky that a lot of our products certainly were, fit that DIY market. So we've got we have a lot of new product, and that's another competitive advantage that we have over the rest of our market anyway, is that we have a lot of heavy investment in product engineering and develop new product across our entire business in Australia and New Zealand. It would not be uncommon for us to have 400 or 500 new products introduced to the market every year. In fact, we just launched a new battery platform in our industrial sector, last couple of weeks. So even with COVID-19, we didn't back off. One of our major global competitors decided to stop all new future product development until they get through COVID-19. So I guess we've taken a different view. We'll continue accelerating our new product development, launch new products, take market share, get into new markets we're not in at the moment, and look at this as an opportunity as opposed to a roadblock to growth.
That's a really great point about COVID that you brought up. And I want to bring it to Vipin as well, because Maruti Suzuki has been in the forefront of automotive supply chain innovations really for decades. We've been observing this across the region to be sure. So curious about what challenges you faced during the pandemic and really how you address these problems.
Yeah, Angie, first of all, I would like to thank the IBM team for giving me this opportunity. Regarding the challenges in the COVID time, so as a manufacturing company, first of all, we people are not that much used to work from home and the web conference kind of a technology. So our first target was to facilitate the people so that the people are all people in the organization. They are able to work from home. So we facilitated this using the different software, hardware, networking, and the end-user devices. Now, second thing was the communication. It was a communication within the organization, then our business partner in terms of the vendors and dealers and other business partners. So using the web meetings, etc., we facilitate the whole organization. Our third task was that the health of our employees and the business partner is important. So we developed some mobile application to monitor the health of our employees, outsourced employees, then the staff of our dealers and the vendors. Because as an organization, we place a good importance about the human capital. Now coming to the supply chain specifically, I would like to mention that whatever the systems which we had in the past, which we have developed over a period of time, it has helped us a lot during this particular period. We have got a comprehensive production planning system, then MRP, materials requirement planning, and the communication to the vendors through the vendor extranet. So basically, we have got a systems in place where we decide the plan beforehand, 15 days in advance, and along with the sequence of production. And then we calculate the materials requirement, and this material requirement is communicated to the vendors, and they supply the material exactly as per the schedule given to them. So these kind of a systems has helped us a lot in terms of streamlining the supply from the vendors. And because of that, we were able to start our production whenever it was allowed by the government. Over a period of time, we developed some additional systems also in terms of monitoring the health of the tier 2 vendors. We had the system for the tier 1 vendors, but for the tier 2 vendors, so those kind of things were developed. And these things helped us in terms of finding out the alternate suppliers. One particular supplier is not able to supply the material because the lockdown was released in phases depending on the geography. So these systems helped us a proper communication with the vendors to find out the alternate supplier. In case we had the limitation, we changed our production plan itself so that we are able to produce also with the limitations, whatever, which were not under our control. So that was as far as the downstream is concerned. In the upstream things, we have got a single dealer management system by which all our dealers are connected with our factory. Since all the dealers are connected with a unique system, one system only, so we were able to know the demand and the pulse of the market, and we were able to change our production plan as per the market demand.
I mean, it really sounds like for the past nearly 2 decades, you've been stress testing the supply chain system to get it to optimal efficiency. and really creating that robust supply chain with that additional layer of obviously continuous customer service and support. So just to kind of understand your thinking a little bit, Vipin, at MSIL, what was part of the decision support and optimization techniques that you implemented over the course of 15 years, close to 2 decades?
Yes, it's a very good question and very appropriate question, I'll say, for our organization. See, our organization has got 50% market share and our products are known for value for money. And under this condition, the cost optimization, overall optimization, and the service levels, these kind of things plays an important role. They are the USP of our organizations. And what I feel is that as such in our college times, we have all studied the statistical algorithms and the operation research, those kind of algorithms. Applying those kind of techniques into a manufacturing industry or in the business was difficult. What I feel is that now we have got these IT systems are available, those kind of a high computing power is available, by which we can implement these kind of techniques and we can create a business value in the organization. So what I'm trying to say is that we can use these optimization, operation research, data analytics, statistical techniques, and other scientific management techniques using the IT system in the organization, and we can create a business value. I'll give you 2 examples which I was personally involved, rather I took a leading role, and we have done a good work into the organization. One was that demand forecasting and inventory optimization for our spare parts business. There we implemented the iLog system along with IBM. So it is mainly using the statistical techniques and the optimization techniques for the better forecasting of the demand in the spare part business and deciding the optimum level of the inventory so that I am able to maintain the service level. I can tell you that after the implementation of the system, our forecasting error got reduced by 40% and our inventory levels got reduced by 20%. And we have got a large number, more than 50,000 kind of SKUs. And so it makes a lot of sense to our business. And we are able to service our customers better. That was one of the examples. And I can tell you that we implemented this solution nearly 12 years before. After that, we are trying to improve upon this particular solution using the other technologies in terms of the artificial intelligence and other things. We are not able to find out a better solution which can give us a better results.
Well, I mean, what you talk about is competitive advantage, right? You're continuously fine-tuning that competitive advantage, and that's what, creating efficiencies for supply chain is all about. Pradeep, I want to bring you in here. You lead IBM services for supply chain across the Asia Pacific. So it's really in your purview as well to help also align with clients. Can you tell us a little bit more about what your team has done to really create that resilient supply chain, of which Vipin is a really strong example? Can you share an example, Pradeep, of how companies and how you've advised companies right now to kind of create a level of resilience during these pandemic times?
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure. So the supply chain squad team that I lead in Asia Pacific is a mix of functional and subject matter experts across each market in Asia Pacific. And our role is to bring the best of IBM supply chain capabilities to our clients and to support them in their top line growth, to support them in managing their bottom line as well as in their large digital transformations. So the world has seen one of the biggest disruptions in the last few months, right? The organizations, the disruption that the organizations have seen, we have not seen this before. So during these pandemic times, during these difficult times, me and my team and our broader leadership team in Asia Pacific, we're actually helping our clients in three key areas. One is recalibrating their supply chain, which I think we've been talked about very nicely in terms of how some of the initiatives he has taken has helped manage demand and supply. So similar initiatives we are working with the client, recalibrate their supply chain. We're also helping our clients manage their costs, because cash is the king now, right? So they need to optimize their operation costs. They need to optimize their working capital so that they can survive these difficult times and then embark on large digital transformations in months or year to come. So if you look at, because of COVID again, right? Because of COVID has highlighted the gaps, the fragilities we have in our supply chain, has highlighted how important it is to have capabilities around AI, around automation to manage such disruptions. Organizations who embarked these journeys in the last 12 to 18 months, I would say, were able to build similar capabilities, were able to build capabilities around visibility, around smarter supply chains. What we have seen while working with these clients in the last few months, we have seen when the pandemic started 6-7 months back, organizations were mainly focusing on executing their business continuity plan, right? Making sure their employees, their customers are safe. Then the focus shifted towards bringing more resiliency in their supply chains. There was more around focus on executing focus on actually realigning their product portfolios, making sure that they are focusing on products which has demand in the market, making sure that they are optimizing their production capacities, and then their network and working capital. And what we see now, the trend may come in a few months or probably a sign that most of these organizations will embark on a large-scale transformation, which will be focused on, operating model redesign, aligning their operating model, and then start building some of the really, core capabilities around digital or cognitive to manage such disruptions in the future.
I got to ask you, Vipin, resilience. This is the word of the hour, of the month, of this year, and likely for the decade. How do you implement that kind of characteristic in your thinking?
So the resilience perspective, the things which I told you, that using the DMS and the communication channel with our vendors, we are able to get the pulse of the market and the limitations of the supply with our systems, and we are able to react to the market in a better way. And there was another example which I wanted to give you about that things regarding the cost optimization. We implemented one that production planning system in our transmission plant. So there we implemented decision optimization center along with IBM, and in our transmission plant we are manufacturing 1.5 million transmissions in a single year, and it has got a different engineering process in terms of the forging, in terms of the heat treatment, and in terms of the machining, etc. And it's a batch manufacturing process, and the different it has got a different batch sizes into the different process, and there is a lot of setup time involved whenever the components are changed. The business problem was how can I increase my productivity, and how can I improve my service level? Whenever my demand is there, I should be able to produce it. So we implemented the solution, and I can share that our downtime got reduced by 20%. And it resulted into a 2% additional production capacity, which means a lot to the business. We are using the decision support system for the cost optimization. So these are the examples which I wanted to share where we have implemented the solution and we have shown the business benefit, and many other things are there.
And it's a great jumping off point for Pradeep here, because from a real life example on the ground that Vipin shared, for you, for the rest of the team, how are you working with other clients, other corporates, as you think about discipline and supply chain, as we head into 2021?
Sure. So to manage the disruptions in the future, organizations have realized they must embark on transformations which can drive the convergence of data and technology, right? We have partnered with various clients globally, and are supporting our clients manage the disruptions. And if I have to pick few clients in Asia Pacific, we are working very closely with one of the largest automotive client in the region. We are working with one of the largest telco client in the region, as well as the consumer good client. And these are the organizations who embarked on their digital transformation 6-9 months back, right? And they have been able to build capabilities to weather, to weather the disruption, to weather the risk by, number one, integrating the various siloed data sources, right? Which is, again, one of the main pain point across the organizations, that data is sitting everywhere. They don't have access to the data, very siloed approach. So these organizations were able to build that integrated data architecture, data view. They have been able to re-engineer their end-to-end supply chain processes, be it planning process or be it inventory management process, by bringing in more automation, by bringing in more analytics and intelligent workflows, and taking a more outside-in view, which is more focused on integrating your internal organization data with the external event data, like news data, weather data, like regulations data, like consumer behavior. So all these parameters, which have become so important in today's difficult times, is very important for these organizations to merge these internal and external data points together and leverage the insights to make very smarter and faster decisions.
That's really a great point, Pradeep. Levine, let me bring you into the conversation. As Grant said, that there's a lot of managing the details, which the team at IBM was able to assist. But within the organization as well, I want to hear how, as you take a look at the broader ecosystem, the broader industry, there are a lot of organizations right now that might find it difficult to know even how to begin their supply chain modernization journey. COVID literally landed on all of us. Some people, like Grant and other corporations have really leaned in. But what about those organizations who are just kind of left agape as to knowing what to do next? Can you share some insight on how organizations can start quickly and potentially deliver the kind of results in a short amount of time?
Yes, it can be confusing, especially if there's an inundation of news on disruptive or innovative technologies. So where do we start? Well, firstly, organizations don't have to rip and replace their systems to address friction in their business. It's not necessary to begin from ground zero, understanding analytics, artificial intelligence, and related technologies in order to put them to work. IBM has a suite of innovative pre-assembled technologies and methodologies that can help jumpstart modernization initiatives and deliver results in a short space of time. Our approach also helps customers consider external partner ecosystem impacts, internal organizational change aspects, and more importantly, where's the best place to start reducing friction?
Give us some tips here. So obviously you've got to take a look right now at internally and all of your business structures and infrastructure. Identify the points of friction. Okay, so obviously, the path to any cure, the path to any solution is identifying the problem. All right, so we've identified the problem. What are your tips for organizations on what to do next?
My advice on pivoting to the new normal is this. Waste no time in getting visibility in place so you can see, predict, and act. It doesn't matter whether it's a prototype, minimum viable or value product, or pilot. A relatively small investment that delivers quick results in an agile, learn and do approach is a great way to deliver incremental value and get people to buy into change. Once you've got a few iterations going to address typical challenges such as supply and demand balancing, you can then combine that visibility and rapid response into your integrated planning capability or S&OP process. We have a plug-and-play approach for that too. Combining the visibility and response and reducing the latency with the planning and forecasting is a great way to building resilience.
What about you, Grant? As you take a look at just how your company was able to manage the ups and downs, what kind of real advice would you share with colleagues and peers?
I agree with those observations in terms of that supply chain visibility is key. And often, if you look at your supply chain, your order management system might be different to your ERP system, or your ERP system is different to your warehouse management system. And then depending whether you've got transport management systems or you're using third-party carriers, it's how you integrate that end-to-end view of the supply chain. So, and we do use one of the IBM tools, the SCI platform, and that for me was key because I want to understand at a point in time, have we got a bottleneck in order management? Have we got a bottleneck in the warehouse? Or are there delays occurring on shipment and delivery to our end customers? And typically, because of the application landscape you have, to answer those questions, you're typically going to 3 or 4 different locations within your or teams in the supply chain to answer that question. And a frustration point for me was being able to see that at my level, to understand where those bottlenecks were, so we could make some decisions about, either focusing to resolve the bottlenecks or redeploying resources to smooth out those bottlenecks. And I think with what we're seeing with COVID and it being so fluid in terms of demand changes, and a lot of that is relative to whatever the government is doing this week or next week, and that has an impact on consumer behaviour quite quickly. Being able to make sure your supply chain is working to optimize those scenarios and situations is key. So that visibility layer, I definitely agree with. And what we saw with the IBM solution was it wasn't that difficult to deploy, but it's a very powerful tool in terms of being able to see what's going on in your end-to-end supply chain, rather than, again, reacting to customer complaints or running multiple reports to try and understand what's going on.
You've essentially just reinforced, the whole reason why a smarter supply chain is integral to running a business. It makes you smarter. It makes you have the greater ability to make those smart business decisions so that you can pivot quickly. And that accessibility and visibility to that level of detail just allows you to be a much more flexible leadership team and making incredible decisions in real time that grows your market share and delivers products to customers at a time when your competitors are not. So that's a real life example, Grant, and thank you for sharing it with why smarter business means smarter supply chain. So I want to thank the panelists here. Levine, thank you so much. Grant, of course, Vipin, Pradeep. It was great to hear all of your insights as to, despite COVID landing on all of us, we can remain resilient and we can still aim with a smarter supply chain to become the frictionless and smarter business that we all aim to be. Thanks, everyone. Okay, now we are going to slip into our last segment of today's agenda, and this is the live Q&A with IBM supply chain experts. And you heard from our IBM experts, Pradeep and Levine. They're now available for live chat right now. Of course, this is broadcasting globally around the world, live in real time. So we're here to take your supply chain related queries. If you're facing a supply chain challenge or you need help with supply chain related issue, please go ahead and ask our experts. In fact, as this panel was going on, we've been collecting a lot of great questions from our audience in real time already. But go ahead, if you haven't done so, go ahead and submit your questions using the Q&A widget on the bottom of your screen, and you could see it right there. We're going to select a few questions, have them answered by one of our experts. So are you guys ready to do that? Pradeep, Levine, you ready?
Yep.
Yes, indeed. Thank you.
All right. So here we go. Levine, let's start with you. Here's our first question from our audience. Can you share some emerging and innovative supply chain practices that you've seen businesses implement?
I think the topic of thank you so much for that, Chris and Angie, and it's very pleasing to be here today. I think the topic of using emerging technologies is very interesting to many organizations, because organizations
I think Levine, we're having some technical issues with Levine, so I'm going to ask you, Pradeep, to jump in there with some of your thoughts on the same question that I presented to Levine here. Pradeep, from your perspective, can you share some emerging and innovative supply chain practices that you've helped and or have seen businesses implement?
Sure, Angie. I think in the meantime, while Levine comes back, let me just share my thoughts, and probably Levine can add to it. So if you would have seen the session in the last half an hour, Jonathan and some of the clients talked about some of the capabilities that they have built, right, in terms of their digital transformation. Emerging and pandemic has actually triggered the digital transformation. Pandemic has triggered how companies would embark on their transformation in the next few months. So organizations would build capabilities around forecasting, around planning, around inventory management, using data and technology. Some of the emerging technologies or the capabilities that we have seen organizations have built in the last 6 to 9 months. Number one, around AI-driven demand sensing. So as I talked about earlier, taking more of an outside-in view, wherein you look at not only your historical data, not only your historical sales and your last year's growth projections, you also look at the outside key data points like, say, regulations data, like the traffic data, the weather data, the consumer behavior data. You bring in more of these external data points into your forecasting, your planning processes, and then build your plan based on that. Be your sales plan, be it your procurement or your inventory plan based on these data points. So that's more around how you can leverage the internal and external data points and build your AI capabilities and do the forecasting based on it. Second one is around visibility. So I think Levine earlier talked about how organizations are struggling to make sure they have the end-to-end visibility with that. And we did a survey a few months back, and 94% of the organizations, 94% of the chief supply chain officers have called out that visibility is a key pain point to them. So if you have to bring in the right visibility, you got to make sure that you have the right data points across your supply chain, you have structured the data, you have integrated your data points, and have the right set of KPIs across your supply chain, which can give you the visibility on a real-time basis, how your supply chain is behaving, what's the health of your supply chain, what's going wrong in your supply chain, where you need to act, and then based on the insights from the external data points, you need to make your decision faster and smarter decisions to avoid any risk to your supply chain.
Well, we've restored our most integral supply chain right now, and that is Levine is back with us. Thank you so much. We had a little bit of a technical difficulty, but sure enough, you're back with us. Levine, Pradeep answered some of the most innovative examples of how supply chain practices need to be implemented these days. So, AI and internal, external data sets and really integrating that into your supply chain forecasting internally as you meet the requirements of customers. But also from your experience, Levine, what have you seen in terms of really innovative solutions and thinking out there that you've noted and want to share with the audience?
Thanks for that, Angie. Apologies, everyone. We seem to be living in the age of disruption, so we got to sway with it. So some of the innovative technologies we're looking at, and I cross my fingers I don't lose connectivity again, is, Pradeep talked about planning and forecasting, and that is a significant piece of the puzzle in terms of building resilience and responding or reacting to the new normal. There is another complementary capability that organizations are beginning to implement. Certainly, IBM's been doing this for a few years. We've moved into being a cognitive supply chain. But some of the capabilities we're seeing being invested in right now is using artificial intelligence to actually see what's happening in terms of sensing the reality of looking at different signals and the reality of what's really happening in the internal and external supply chain, and being able to take those signals and take those events and predict disruptions and then detect patterns between various activities in the supply chain and come up with recommendations on how to respond to those disruptions. So very much so in the space of crisis management, minimizing the response time to managing disruptions. IBM's been impacted by the tsunami in 2011 in Japan. And we've been able to reduce our response time by 90% on disruptions. So certainly using artificial intelligence to help respond very rapidly in the face of disruptions is something that's become very popular in the market today.
All right, we've got another question here from the audience, and this is a good one. I mean, noting the timing that we've seen. From March to May, and there was a demand in the market, but companies were unable to supply their products. But since June, the demand supply trend of automotive aftermarket has changed as the previous trend has broken. So how do you predict the new trend of demand for automotive industries, and what will be cost-effective supply process? That's a great real-life question right there.
That's to me, Angie. That's a solid question indeed. So certainly, we've seen both shocks in the market. We've seen supply shocks and we've seen demand shocks, and now we're seeing a kind of reverberation between that, right? So predicting the new trend of demand needs a fresh approach. We can't really reuse the same old formula in the past because the markets change, right? So what we need to do is we need to tweak it slightly. So the way to tweak it is generally forecasting demand based on sales orders is pretty unreliable in today's uncertain environment. So that's okay when the supply chain is rhythmic and things are smooth flowing, right? And certainly not in the case of the last 6 months. So organizations do need to tweak their approach to consider predicting and planning based on inventory at the place of fulfillment. What's not actually happening out of your warehouse or distribution center or your place of supply, but actually what's happening at your stores or your place of delivery. So we need to predict using location intelligence, and so we need to complement current demand planning in terms of what's happening at the location of fulfillment, cater for disruptions at that location, cater for customer buying patterns, cater for social events occurring at these locations, right? So this needs to, the current planning capability needs to also be complemented with true inventory visibility in terms of what's happening at every node in your supply chain. So when you combine that visibility of what's happening at the fulfillment place, plus where your inventory is across every node in your supply chain, that starts to help you predict better on the demand and respond to the demand.
Got it. Thank you, Levine. This question is for Pradeep, and this is from Vishal Desai from Decathlon Sports. And I am asking this question for the bicycle business. Pradeep, the question is, how do we manage S&P for the OP for the coming year as the future demand is highly unpredictable? Just to add, as of now, we are planning highly ambitious numbers, assuming the trend will remain the same as the current trend.
Sure, I think it's a very interesting question, and I guess Levine partly talked about it in terms of how some of the external behaviors will definitely drive the forecasting, ways of forecasting in future. So the traditional ways of forecasting, where we looked at just the historical number, added a basic algorithm to it, added a basic growth number to it, has changed completely, right? So organizations now need to look at how the consumer behavior, how the consumer trends are on a weekly, on a monthly basis, and take those insights in making their planning. So if you look at the bicycle business, again, I think in the last 3 or 4 months, or probably in the last 6 months, we have seen that during the lockdown, during this pandemic period, demand for be it your say bicycle or say motorbike obviously went down because of everything was shut down. People were not able to go to the market and dealers and buy their vehicles. But now if you see, right, I mean, the trend is people will become more once the lockdown opens, people will obviously go to the market and do more physical workouts, make sure that they are they catch up with what they have lost in the last 6-8 months. You would see a trend. You would see a trend of people spending more time in doing physical workouts, and most likely a demand may go up driving because of that factor. So all these consumer trends is something that we need to closely watch in the next months to come, and see how these insights can be taken into our monthly, into our weekly planning activities, and then drive our end-to-end sales and operation planning process here.
That's great. All right, Levine, your turn here. This is from our audience here from Srikant Snolu. And the question is, what is the importance of network in the current scenario? This is a great question. And how do you restructure the existing networks?
It's one of, that's an excellent question. It's actually one of my passions, because today no business is an island. Every business is actually a thriving ecosystem. And so the network is extremely important. So there's a few considerations that one needs to consider. The first thing is, how do you reduce the friction in onboarding that network? And onboarding is not a one-time activity. There's always this constant need to collect information from your suppliers, for example. And this is quite a burdensome process for suppliers. The second thing that's needed is to reduce the friction in the regular exchange of information with the network. For example, with your suppliers, there'll be exchange of procurement-related or sourcing-related documentation, purchase orders, shipping notices, invoices. So you have to reduce that friction as well. And we have seen in the last 6 months, many organizations really accelerating their path to digitalizing and moving all their transactions to digital. And a side effect or byproduct of moving everything to the digital is now you have all the data to deliver better insight, right? The third component to that is interoperability. It is interoperability within your trading ecosystem is paramount, because without interoperability, you're going to get a total fragmentation in the market, and it becomes cost prohibitive for a business to trade across multiple trading networks. So the best way to implement or improve interoperability is for organizations to invest in standardized systems or international open standards that improve interoperability. Thank you.
Got it. Well, Pradeep, Levine, thank you so much. And audience, don't go away, because we want to ask you what you think. We've got some back-to-back polls that we'd like to ask you. Having heard the benefits of frictionless supply chains from our experts and from industry leaders, the question for you is really this. When do you plan to friction-proof your supply chain and make it more resilient? So you have 30 seconds to share your views here. We also want to ask a second poll question as well. So get ready. And the results, let's take a look at the results from the poll. Well, there you go. 62.5% of you already doing it. So congratulations there. And in fact, the next 25% of you are saying, you know what, we're on it. We're getting to it. It's going to happen in the next 3 months. That's fantastic to see. Okay. And also, let's go to our next poll here. This is also on our mind, and so this is no doubt on your mind as well. Would you like IBM to contact you for discussing supply chain capabilities? So there you go, yes or no, 30 seconds. I think our team truly would love an answer to that, and we want to thank you for participating in that poll as well. Okay, so there you go. Thanks for participating in this poll. And as next steps, I really encourage you to go ahead and get as much from the resources that this webcast has provided for you. Levine, Pradeep, I want to thank you again for answering those live questions from the audience. We will, of course, get to all of your questions, and not necessarily live for the audience, but all of those questions and all of your questions will be answered by this team. Of course, you can continue to ask the questions and even get the one-on-one consultation with IBM experts in your region. And once again, I'm told at no charge, using the schedule a consultation widget on your screen. Also, starting tomorrow, the Academy is available online, on demand, and ongoing. So there you have it. Come back often, bring your colleagues to get their queries and questions answered. There's a lot of insightful content here that I'm sure you're going to find of great value. The Academy also hosts immersive demos, which are really available now for you to check out. And of course, please share your feedback. It's important to us as a team to know what you liked, what you didn't. The IBM team, I can attest to, have been so detail-oriented and so customer-focused that it was a pleasure to work with this team, a pleasure to really moderate this session live for you. And it has been my honor to join all of you who have joined us from around the world and call it a day. It's a wrap. What a great day it's been. It has been my absolute pleasure to be here today. I know I've learned so much as a journalist, as a moderator, and I'm truly inspired by what the speakers have shared. And I hope that you have found it a valuable investment of your time. Take back those relevant insights and actions from this event. And together, you know, it's up to you really to build smarter businesses powered by smarter supply chains. As a customer, we depend on you guys to get it delivered. Supply and demand, no doubt, very volatile, and it will continue to do so. But it's those disruptions that will be mitigated by your ideas, your solutions, and most importantly, your innovations. You've been a great audience. Thank you all, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.